It's fair to say that Star Wars is not in a good spot lately. Celebration did not light the internet ablaze. People just aren't all excited to see Rey once again. And that Mandalorian Season 3, well, it was a bummer indeed. There's criticism all over the place at the franchise, at Lucasfilm, at Kathleen Kennedy. And now it appears that major big box retailers are saying fix Star Wars now or lose retail space. Well, we're starting to get some minor indications that actually there may be things beginning to happen behind the scenes. We'll talk about them right now. Explaining entertainment, keeping you ahead of the culture curve. It's what we do each and every day here on the WDW Pro channel. Often that has to do with Star Wars. It was once the biggest franchise on the planet, but under the tutelage of Kathleen Kennedy, it has been diminished greatly. But that's not the end of the story. There's a chance for Star Wars to rise once more. Can it do it? Well, we don't know, but we'll discuss it, and we'll discuss what we are beginning to see. Joining us to help us in that endeavor is the one and only living encyclopedia of Star Wars, who, by the way, had quite the spicy take on the recent Luke Skywalker news and rumors. Lauren, you earned a major following in the last video. How are you doing?
I'm recovering, I guess you could say. I spent a couple days pretty much on fire. I had a bunch of people reach out to me to make sure I was okay. I haven't lit myself on fire, but I'm in a pretty obstinate position right now.
Well, Lauren, people were talking to me about, Lauren finally got really emotional about, what's going on. And I said, well, Lauren reserves the spice for when it's needed. And I think that you really love Star Wars. I think that's clear to everybody. And we've reached a point now where people are actively destroying Star Wars, and they need to fix this. I think that your response was exactly right. I think that it resonated with people. I don't think you crossed any sort of line, and I'm excited to see what your take is on maybe some good news. Maybe this is a good news video on Star Wars. Are you ready to dive in yet, or should we hold skepticism high when it comes to Lucasfilm?
Well, I'm skeptical, but hit me with what you got. We'll see what happens.
I'll hit you with my best shot. All right. Folks, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithm. When you click it, we're talking about that notification bell. All right, let's get into the Star Wars news. And the first thing I want to do is I was given from one of those same sources that we used for the Luke Skywalker information. I was given a bit of communication that came from someone at a very high level working for a major box retailer, big box retailer store. The logo is blue. I'll let everybody out there in the audience figure out which major retailer this would be, right? It's a big one. But this one with a blue logo, a major player in that company, apparently has had some things to say in regards to Lucasfilm, in regards to Star Wars, about what needs to get fixed and needs to get fixed now before Star Wars loses retail space. And so I'd like to read this message that was sent, Lauren, and I am told that this is fairly well known now with the studio and perhaps with other retailers. So here we go. Here's exactly what it says. I'll read it verbatim. This is what was sent over to let them know exactly how displeased this retailer is.
Make sure to catch the Pro Show Thursdays 5 to 7 Eastern Time. Entertainment Explained, The Culture Curve Conquered, live with Pro and all his friends.
It says, imagine a home game Super Bowl where the star quarterback is benched. It's a terrible game for the home team with every play going wrong. They're fumbling all around. No matter what the other team is running up the score, the star quarterback is still kept on the bench. Finally, he inexplicably comes off the bench for a brief couple of minutes a little after halftime and brings the home team back in the game. The crowd goes wild. Commentators are alive again. Fans that are tuning out are back in front of their sets. A turnaround is in the air. The live audience can feel the shift. But wait, what's this? The coach? She has benched her star quarterback again, right after he just proved he could win the game for the team and the fans. What's happening? The crowd can't believe this. What's wrong with this coach? Is she trying to lose? What does she have against her star player? Why won't she put him back in? The fans don't get it. The commentators don't get it. Meanwhile, time is running down. More misplays and fumbles. Things are getting worse. Fans are turning off their TVs. There's nothing left to see here. Fans are leaving the stands in droves, heading towards their cars to beat the parking chaos. Those still in the stadium watching this historically bad game play out are booing the coach. She is stoically sipping her soy latte, watching her team get scored against over and over, the hole getting deeper, the clock winding down while her star quarterback, who could win the game for everybody, is sitting at the end of the bench, staring forlornly into nothingness. The crowd can't believe this. Every fan would have gotten our star in there from opening kickoff. What's going on? Jerseys, caps, and other merchandise are flying into the garbage. Face paint is coming off. The TV cameras turn to the owner's box. Why hasn't he used his red telephone to call down to the bench and make the overriding call? But no, the guy in the owner's box is calmly scrolling through his texts, making reservations for dinner. Seems fine with losing. How bad do things need to get before the star player comes off the bench for that final Hail Mary? Who calls it? When? Will it be too late? Will it be enough? At this point, could this incompetent coaching staff map out an all in-game winning play? Stay tuned, folks. We'll be right back after word from our sponsor. Now, that is what was apparently sent over to let the people over at Lucasfilm know just how displeased this big box retailer is. They had an expectation, and there were certain box sets made. We talked about this in the previous video. There's actually a box set that was made that has Luke Skywalker, R2-D2, and Grogu in it. And it did very well. And that exists because the retailers and Hasbro thought that they were going to get those characters together for a longer period of time than has happened. Lauren, what do you make of this? Is it a good analogy that was sent over to try to explain the disdain that this particular retailer has with Disney and what they're doing with Star Wars?
Well, sure. It basically outlines the situation perfectly well. You have what amounts to, rather than a quarterback, I would use the analogy of a general who's on the bench, who's not calling the plays. He's not prosecuting the campaign. He's losing ground on the battlefield. And you have this, I guess you would call it maybe a staff sergeant, who is trying to direct the campaign, but obviously failing. You're losing your material, you're losing your weapons, your vehicles. There's not going to be a way to prosecute the war unless you put somebody competent in charge. And in this case, they have no interest in doing so. There is something about their ideology that prevents them from letting their hero character shine. They don't see him as a hero. They see him as a cautionary tale. And that tells you everything that you need to know about the people who are directing this campaign.
Okay, so let's break that down a little bit farther, though, Lauren. Let's say that it doesn't matter if he's a hero. Let's say that it matters that the market clearly wants this character. The market, the money wants this character, right? The money will be unleashed if this character appears. We know that. The interest of fans will be unleashed if this character appears. Mm-hmm. And this studio seems determined not to do that. What? I don't understand. I don't understand the mechanism that allows this to happen. I don't understand the economics behind it where, imagine, Lauren, if you were an artist, for example, and somebody said, I will pay you millions of dollars if you will just draw stick figures. And you said, you know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to give you the stick figure. It will take me 5 seconds, but I'm not going to do it.
What if you had somebody that said, well, all of the original members were still alive. Please, I beg of you, I'll give you $1 billion to have the Beatles get back together and do a reunion show. And instead, the person who's running the venue says, no, I'll just go with this cover band.
That's right. You get the tribute band. Absolutely. Well, now, Lauren, one of the things that has happened in the last 48 hours is I was given some information from somebody that I think many of the people in the audience would know. And it's not highly specific, but it's just this message, and I feel it's important to bring it to everybody out there and to you. And the message was simply that there are two studios that Disney realizes they have a major problem, Marvel and Lucasfilm. And I was told that, yes, Disney recognizes that there is a serious problem right now that needs to be corrected. Now, how they're going to correct it, I wasn't given that, but it was just simply to say, hey, Disney has heard from the fans. They get it. Apparently, the Mandalorian statistics are not good. Apparently, more concerning to Disney is the fact that Star Wars Celebration viewership was allegedly really bad. Lauren, do you think that Disney will now begin to step in? I noticed one thing in the news. I hate to, maybe I should just stop there and ask you the question, but I'll introduce this. I noticed that there's this new shift now that's they're saying that Daisy Ridley's Rey is not the main character in the movie she's going to appear in, and that's this new leak that has come about. Do you think that maybe Disney is beginning to shift a little?
Well, okay. Let me back up on that a little bit, because I want to talk about both Luke and Rey. If I'm being as neutral as possible, if I'm taking my fan hat off, let's pretend that I'm just an executive working at Disney who has no personal or at Lucasfilm, who has no real personal feelings about Star Wars. There are issues with having Luke as a major character in a show or movie.
He overshadows everybody else simply because of how much he's loved.
That's not the issue. I don't see that as the issue. The issue.
I don't either. Let me say that too, Lauren. I don't either. I was trying to parrot what I've heard, but to me, that's insane. And that's something you hear all the time. But I think, well, is it a problem that Batman is the most popular character in Batman? What does that mean? Who cares? You should be overjoyed that your character is that popular. Anyway, I'm sorry that I interrupted you.
No, that's the ideological thing that messes with their minds. But again, let's say that I'm being completely dispassionate here. There is at least a couple of different problems with using Luke. One is that you have to use the deepfake technology, which is expensive and time-consuming, and it's still not perfected. It's getting pretty close, but it's not there yet. While you're doing that, you almost have to bring Mark Hamill onto the set. It's a respect thing. He doesn't really need to be there.
Doesn't he still do the voice too, though, Lauren?
I think that in the Book of Boba Fett episodes, that was all digitally created. It was the same thing.
Oh, so they took his. I see. So they took his voice and sampled it and then reproduced it using artificial intelligence. I see.
Correct. Yeah, they have the ability to do that with him. They're doing it with Darth Vader now. So you don't really need Mark Hamill on set, but people want Mark Hamill on set, and I believe that's why they do that. I think they show in the documentaries that they bring him in because it's a respect thing. It's that you want him to be involved. You want him to be a part of it. You want him to pass on what he knows about performing Luke to the actor who's going to be doing the stand-in work, and that's a nice thing to do.
It's admirable.
It's also expensive. And you're not going to be able to use Luke indefinitely. Now, there are ways that you can tell stories in this time period where you could do the deepfake if you're willing to shoulder those kind of expenses. I think the way Luke would probably be used, if they were going to use him, is as the head of an academy. He would be a teacher. You would see him in those kind of cameo roles that they said that they might use. I suspect if you were going to do something Luke-centric, that you would want him to be a little bit more than a cameo. Back before we knew what Tales of the Jedi was, my assumption was that that's what the show was going to be. It was going to be seeing Luke at the Academy, relating stories to a next generation, talking about all kinds of different things in Jedi and Sith history. And then you could have these little mini episodes where you were exploring different time periods. So that way you have Luke as kind of the connective tissue between the stories, but he's not really the main character. I could see them doing something like that. Rey, I think, in a way, has the same problem, because they've said that it's going to be 15 years beyond the Rise of Skywalker. At that point, her character would be older, not so old that she couldn't do big stunts and things, but if her role is going to be the reestablishment of a new Jedi Academy, then what you're naturally doing is setting up a bunch of new characters who are the next generation, any one of whom, or multiple of whom, could be the next big characters. I would imagine what they do then is pay attention to what the audience responds to, who do they like, what is the audience making connections with, and then you start elevating those characters in the storytelling.
Absolutely. Now, we also need to say, Lauren, and you're aware of this, but prior to going into this video, just moments before, we received yet more information regarding Rangers of the New Republic and how it was connected with Luke Skywalker, with the Jedi, etc. We've received quite a bit of information about that over the last few days. Some of it seems awfully true and real, and we're vetting it. Some of it seems a little bit like perhaps rumor mongering, or even people trying to send stuff that would throw us off the trail and start us on false kind of stuff. That's part of the challenge of vetting out all of the information that we get. But some of this stuff looks really impressively true, that yes, Rangers of the New Republic was indeed going to feature Luke Skywalker, was going to be the avenue they used to have him train Grogu, maybe have cutaways, whatever, and was going to feature Jedi heavily. That seems to me to be sort of the missing thing from this Mandoverse, and perhaps Rangers with Gina Carano was going to have a lot of Jedi in it, something that seems sorely lacking in the current roster of series. Now, Ahsoka, of course, is a Jedi, and we'll get to see some lightsabers and all that there. But what do you make of the Rangers having potentially been the place that we were going to see more Luke, perhaps more of that deep fake technology used?
So that was a different direction than I expected based on what you've been reporting. The way I saw it, largely, I think because of the logo and some of the seeds that they had sown in Mandalorian, was I assumed this was going to be an X-Wing pilot centric kind of a show. I figured that Carson Teva would probably be a part of it, maybe Trapper Wolf. Gina was obviously going to be part of it. You expect Rangers to range, and they've kind of shown in The Mandalorian that they're sort of acting as frontier policemen in a way. The Republic, they've gone to great effort to show, is stretched thin. They don't have a lot of resources. They're not capable of keeping the peace, especially in the Outer Rim, but they can at least try and keep an eye on things and probably build some kind of a rapid response force if there's things that they stumble upon that are interesting. So I kind of thought that was the direction we were going to be going.
And that may have been, Lauren, that may have been the main storyline, but with a substantial amount, more than what I had anticipated, of stories regarding Jedi also thrown in there. Now, before the video, you and I were talking about some of the stuff that we looked at. We're not going to talk about it here because, once again, we can't fully vet some of this stuff yet. Right. But, and some of the things could be doctored, all that sort of thing. But you had a theory about where that could have gone. Could you go into a little detail for the audience on what you were discussing with me? Because I found it fascinating.
Sure. And this just occurred to me as you were talking to me about it. I got to thinking about the ranging part of Rangers. And if what they were trying to do was set up this Marvel-like cinematic event where you have these crossovers of these various shows, the big bad that we're all trying to get to is Thrawn. And the last that we saw Thrawn was in Rebels, when he was jumped into hyperspace with Ezra Bridger and the Purrgil to parts unknown. And everybody has speculated that Thrawn ends up back in the unknown regions where he originally came from. We don't know that that's true, but it seems to be a logical assumption. Now, the unknown regions in the new Disney canon are a little bit different than they were in the old EU. In the old EU, the unknown regions weren't necessarily difficult to get to. It's just that there were a lot of big bad things there, and you'd have to be a bit of a daredevil to visit. In the new Disney canon, they made it almost impossible to navigate, and they were sort of alluding to some events in the old EU, a great big supernova that took place in the distant past that shattered planets, created all kinds of navigational hazards, magnetic problems, mass shadows. You can't take a straightforward jump into the unknown regions, and it is still incredibly dangerous there. What Zahn has introduced in his new Disney canon novels is kind of a unique bit of information about the Chiss ascendancy where Thrawn comes from, and that is that they maintain a state secret, and that is that they do have force-sensitive individuals, but they work a little bit differently than they do in other parts of the galaxy. Their force-sensitive beings are exclusively prepubescent females, and they train these females to use the force for navigation so that they can navigate the unknown regions better than any of the other factions that are there. That gives them a tactical advantage. But these females, which are called in the Chiss Ascendancy, they call them Skywalkers. They begin to lose the ability as they approach puberty. Now, other factions within these areas, they don't have the same level of technology as what exists in the more commonly frequented areas of the galaxy far, far away. They don't have complex navicomputers. They don't have droids at all. And so they're making up for some of that lack of technology with this force ability. And so what I got to thinking about when you started saying that the Jedi were heavily involved in Rangers of the New Republic, if these Rangers are looking for Imperials that might be hiding within the unknown regions, or at least in these areas that are difficult to get to, it might make sense for them to liaise with the Jedi because they have those abilities that could allow them to navigate. So maybe that's the direction they were going.
You know, and the interesting thing about that, Lauren, is that some of the things we've been given by multiple sources are potential outlines of what was going to happen in Rangers. I find that worth looking at simply because I think Favreau is now saying that perhaps what happened with Rangers, or maybe this is speculation on many people's part, but that what was going to happen in that show now is going to be moved into The Mandalorian Season 4. So perhaps that gives us some idea of where this is going. But I do have some good news for people out there, and I don't want to hide the good news about Star Wars. We talk about Star Wars sometimes in a way that's negative. We don't want to. We want Star Wars to be wonderful and great, like it was with The Mandalorian Season 2, like it was with a few episodes since then and some content. But, you know, we want Star Wars to be wonderful. That's the goal. And this seems to be heading in the right direction, although we'll see what happens. This out of StarWarsNewsNet.com. And let me say also that Echo Base Network was key in letting us know that this was out there. Timothy Zahn on Thrawn, the challenge of adapting the Grand Admiral and his hopes for future books. This by Grant Davis. Says Timothy Zahn explained why he thinks that Grand Admiral Thrawn is a difficult character to adapt and why he believes that Dave Filoni is up to task to do just that with the Ahsoka series. Here's what he said. I wanted my character to be someone his men would follow out of loyalty, unlike Palpatine or Vader who manipulate and use fear. Everyone is ready to follow him. I was inspired by historical military, and we must add a touch of Sherlock Holmes for intelligence and the ability to deduce. Captain Paleon is his Dr. Watson, someone he can explain his thoughts to for the reader to understand. He continued on. The danger is that the screenwriters write it badly. Well, that is a danger, isn't it? We don't need any more of the Book of Boba Fett. He is a tactician, always ahead of his enemies. Dave Filoni showed in Rebels that he understood the character, so I think everything will be fine. And this is the key thing that I saw in this, Lauren. He says, as long as Filoni and Jon Favreau remain at the helm. That doesn't sound like somebody who's confident in the rest of Lucasfilm, I'll just tell you. So I thought that was fascinating that he said it, but we'll continue. And I am, of course, available to help them if needed. We only talked briefly about all this, but Dave promised to meet the writers and discuss with them in the near future. Let's finish this out. He said, Thrawn's return was very exciting. Lucasfilm called me to show me concept designs for Rebels. At the same time, we were discussing future novels about the character. It was then 8 months before the announcement of the Grand Admiral's return at Star Wars Celebration London in 2016. There's not much difference between the original Thrawn and the Thrawn of this new timeline. It's the same character in different geopolitical conditions surrounded by different characters, but he hasn't changed. Lucasfilm wanted these new books to be connected to Rebels, so I tried to make as many connections as possible. They gave me the scripts for the episodes in advance so that I was aware of the plot. The goal is for everything to fit together. The second book takes place between Season 2 and Season 3, and the third takes place during a period of series where he is off camera in Season 4. And then he finishes by saying, I would like to write more novels. Well, we would too. We would like for you to do that. And we pitch ideas to Lucasfilm. As for Thrawn, there's a 9-year gap between the end of Rebels and the character's reappearance at Ahsoka. There are things to do during this time. I'll keep you up to date. So this is why I'm a little bit hopeful, maybe. Lauren, if the people over at Disney know that there's a problem, and if Timothy Zahn is open to returning, and he seems to have at least managed to keep a good relationship between Filoni and maybe Favreau, not sure if they've made connections at any point, but there's a chance here. And that's all we ask for. We're like Lloyd Christmas at this point. There's a chance. Do you have any hope that Timothy Zahn might be brought back? And if so, that we can stop having terrible Star Wars books and instead go back to what the quality that he produced at one point?
Well, okay. There's a lot to unpack here.
Give them some hope, Lauren. Give us some hope.
So I think first I should probably say I am a few books behind when it comes to the new Thrawn novels. The most recent ones that he published were the Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy. And I have read through the first novel of that trilogy, and I thought that it was brilliant. I really did like that novel. But I have not finished the trilogy just because I've had too many things on my plate. And that's a failing on my part. What I can tell you from that first new Disney trilogy that he was talking about, that he created, is that I think Zahn is a little more intelligent than some of the other. I probably shouldn't phrase it that way. Zahn tends to write in such a way that he's avoiding referencing things that are not directly outside his own story's purview. And that makes them able to kind of exist in their own pseudo-Zahn bubble, if you will.
The galaxy is big, and he's got a spot that he inhabits. Would you say that?
A little bit. He actually brought a lot of the old EU stuff from his previous writings back into the new canon. He did update them a little bit so that, for instance, in the original Zahn novels, he was making some assumptions about the Clone Wars. He was detailing the Imperial tech that was known at the time. After the prequels came out with these new Disney novels, he was able to essentially rehash some of the things that he had written before and update those portions of the story so that they now had Clone Wars era ships that were of the correct designation. That's one example. He tends to not necessarily tie into other authors' novels if he can help it. I suspect there's a few things that he may be mandated to tie in. Obviously, there was the Thrawn and Darth Vader novel that took place at least partially on Batuu. That was definitely mandated. Zahn's an author who wants to work, and so he's going to he's going to say positive things. He's going to want to maintain that relationship. I don't begrudge him that at all. And so, am I hopeful? Do I think that he could tell good Thrawn stories? Would I want to see more from him? Absolutely. Do I trust that Filoni is going to go to Zahn for advice? Not really. I think that's another one of those formality things that you do, like you do with Mark Hamill. You want to get the approval of the audience. You want them to accept your version of the character that you're now co-opting. So you have to have the optics of making nice with the guy who created him. And the guy who created him wants to work and wants to get more novels to publish. So there's this tidy little relationship. I'm not trying to be a completely black pill guy. If we can get more Zahn novels that are good, then I'm interested in that. On the other hand, if they're going to tie it to Ahsoka, and if Ahsoka is going to do their version of Heir to the Empire that invalidates the actual Heir to the Empire, I'm not interested in that.
Right. I will totally agree with that. And, Lauren, I think we both agree that at this point, the correct solution for Star Wars is, one, Kathleen Kennedy is going to have to go somewhere else because she just doesn't have what it takes, or she's uninterested in Star Wars being a highly successful evergreen franchise. However, I am still looking for these course corrections to begin because I think, based on what I'm hearing, that the Star Wars Celebration response and viewership was so bad that it has Disney's attention. And surely given all the fires that Disney currently has, they would like to put at least one of them out. And maybe, just maybe, we'll start to see something happening over at Lucasfilm. I think, folks, that what we need to watch for is what happens with Indiana Jones. I'm hearing that it's a good movie. I'm shocked. I'll be shocked if it's a good movie, but I will also tell the truth. If I'll be there day one to review it. If it's good, so be it. If it's bad, so be it. I'll call it as best as I can. But if it's bad, and if the box office is bad for Indiana Jones, then that may be a sign that somebody is finally on the way out. Lauren, let me give it to you for last thoughts, and then make sure you tell everybody where they can find you on this great, big, beautiful web.
Sure. I'm looking at things right now as I think it's too late. If they want to make a course correction now, they're about 3 years too late. I'm not trying to be a downer here. I know we want this to be a positive video, but I'm telling you, Lucasfilm, I advocated on the site the other day for a boycott. Anybody who knows me would not believe I would ever do that. I got into a long debate on Twitter yesterday with somebody who's desperately trying to pull me back into the fold and saying, you've got to have hope. It's like, look, these people have had 8 years, and actually 11 if you want to go to when they actually purchased the property. They have told me time and again, they don't like me. They don't think that the characters that we like are good people. They think they're cautionary tales. They've told me that they don't want my money. So I don't see a reason.
And they'll fire people who are like you.
Yeah. And so from my standpoint, it's like, hope is not a strategy. What I said in the Twitter debate was I directly quoted Rogue One. It's like, rebellions aren't built on hope. You need hope as a part of a rebellion so that people keep fighting, but it's based on willpower and discipline and logistics and planning and coordination. And they have weaponized our hope. They have dangled in front of us. They have been avoiding the question all this time so that we would hang on and keep watching their stuff and keep buying their merchandise. And they've now told us definitively, no, we're going to tie into the sequel trilogy. We don't care what you think. You're going to like our characters whether you like it or not. So they've shown me what they are. If they want my business, if they want my money, they're going to have to earn it. And it's going to take more than one little cameo or one little show. They're going to have to consistently put out good product. And that's going to have to be over a long period of time before they're going to get me to open my wallet again.
So, Lauren, we're both calling for a change in leadership then?
Not just at Lucasfilm either. I think you have to get rid of an awful lot of the people there, but you've also got to get rid of Iger. This I don't believe the change is going to come until the shareholders revolt. At this point, the only thing that they're responding to is whether the stock price remains stable. So I think we need to show them that we have displeasure with the company as a whole, and we no longer trust you. You've given us all the reasons in the world not to trust you. So if the stock price is impacted, that's when people will start to feel some pain.
Yep. And we're not advocating for anything financially. We're not telling people what to do with their money. We're not financial advisors. Seek out your own financial advisor for financial advice. All of that said, Lauren, I could not say anything better or beyond what you have just done. You have communicated perfectly the ideas that I hold as well, that Disney is a company that is deeply flawed and needs improved, and that improvement needs to happen before we're going to be pleased and ready to open our arms to the mouse once more. Lauren, thank you for being here today. Thank you for looking at perhaps some silver lining out beyond where we currently are. But again, there's going to need to be some major changes at Disney before we get there. Folks, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithms when you click it. We're talking about the notification bell. Drop a comment down below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Are you pro-Disney or are you anti-Disney? Do you think that Star Wars can improve with Kathleen Kennedy still at the helm? We're curious. We want to know your thoughts, so share them with us. Folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.